As real estate photography continues to evolve, there are new trends to look for going into the new year. And so in this episode, I'm going to talk about some new trends to look for, including things that will change to content, to software, to gear, to add-ons, and more. The first trend to look for is known as story-driven content. And it's more than just a buzzword. It's something that really started in 2024 and is really taking off. Now, this is going to affect both photos and videos to some degree as we're doing real estate photography and real estate videography. The biggest thing here is that it's going to be another talking point that you can use with your clients, especially those that are on social media. Because what this is a trend towards getting content in front of people that avoids ad fatigue. So right now there's a lot of ad fatigue. People are seeing ads everywhere. And even when you go onto a listing site and you look at a description for some property, it's going to say things like, it's got a great kitchen, great for entertaining, but it doesn't really speak to the person. So story-driven content instead is from a first-person perspective. Now, this can be very, very simple, and it's a matter of how then this is going to be used. So aside from all the regular footage that we would normally gather for the listing service, for instance, on your local MLS or other websites, for instance, like Zillow, Realtor.com and whatnot, there will be things that will be specific to this story-driven content. So you'll see the popularity of this, especially on Instagram, but it's not just Instagram itself. But if you take a look through Instagram, this is where a lot of realtors are putting in a lot of their effort. In fact, the technology survey from the National Association of Realtors in 2024 once again showed that social media was the #1 tool that got leads for realtors. So there's this trend to go toward Instagram, social media like Facebook and whatnot. But the key here is that doing so, the word of the day is story-driven content. Now, once again, this can be very simple, and it's not a matter of just Instagram stories or Instagram reels. What it is, putting the person in the first-person perspective, it can be as simple as just shooting something where I could be sitting at this pool and look what it would be like here. Or I'm in a kitchen, and yes, I would still have large pictures of a kitchen, but I'd also be showing if it had some type of view or outdoor cook area, what would it be like if you were in this kitchen? Same with any type of shot that shows where you would be as a first-person perspective into this property. So that then relates to a person more than just an ad or more than just a description on the listing service that says, we've got this great big kitchen, you've got this beautiful entryway. Those things are important, but it really doesn't connect to users. And users nowadays are more likely to connect with someone on social media, not just by friending them or having some other link to them, but by understanding and relating to the content that they're producing. Now, this is even more important when it comes to working with clients doing architectural photography. For instance, every single one of the interior designers that I work with when I shoot for remodel companies and whatnot, they're always wanting stuff that's specific to Instagram that's high quality. Now, it doesn't mean everything is going to be that way. I shoot for interior designers that want to show everything in the picture. So if they remodeled a kitchen, they do want to see the entire kitchen. But then they also want to have stuff that they're going to share, for instance, on Instagram to tell a story. The story-driven content of what would it be like to be here? What would it be if you were close here, if you got intimate with this? And the key to this also doesn't have to be always for story-driven content, but specifically if it's going to be on social media, is to think about cropping or shooting so that you have a finished image that's in about 4:5 resolution. So that gives a good fit on Instagram and just about everybody's phone, even if this were to be shared on Facebook. But the key is that the followers then of that Instagram page or that Facebook page, whatever it is that's owned by that client, whether it's a realtor, whether it's an interior designer or a remodel company or whatever, their followers are connecting with them. And that's how they generate more leads, not just through advertisement because of all the ad fatigue that's out there. So the story-driven content is very popular. It's going to be even more so throughout 2025. And so think with the end in mind as you're working with clients. If you know they have a good social media presence, start talking about story-driven content. You'll see that you'll probably get some eyes light up if they're familiar with doing anything on social media. Maybe some of the older clients might not be so familiar with that. But this trend will then be a talking point that you can use to get more gigs from this client, and also by producing the content that will really help them sell their services by doing this story-driven content. The next trend that will inevitably get stronger as we go into 2025, we saw a lot of it in 2024, and that's AI-powered editing. Now, I'm not talking about generative AI where you're completely changing a property or you're just completely generating something new. I'm also not talking about just virtual staging. Instead, AI-powered editing. This AI is able to do a lot for us. As you know, tools like we can use generative fill to remove certain things. We've got the remove tool in Photoshop. Nowadays, it's so much faster to just edit some things in post than it is on site to start moving or futzing around with things. Now, you don't have to do all this for free. It's one of those things where you can charge extra to have these things removed or to have them changed using AI tools. The thing is that you no longer have to rely on outsourced editors to do all this work for you, and your clients also don't have to rely on that either. It used to be just a few years ago that if you wanted to have item removal done, well, you'd probably have to outsource that because there was just so much work involved with it. But nowadays, with the AI tools that are available, just even in Photoshop, you can do a lot on your own and do it very quickly. So two things really that can come out of this as we're going into 2025 is that editors, yeah, you probably will still stay busy, but as more photographers find that it's easy to do some of this AI-powered editing, well, you're going to need to up your game on that. If you're a photographer and you're going to do your own editing, this is a boon because what you can also do is promote this to your clients. So as you're on site, you see something that probably should be changed, you can tell your client, it's like, you could be after you even take the shots, is that I noticed this and this and this. I can go ahead and edit those out for you and do it at the same time that I'm editing, still get you the fast turnaround time, but it'll cost you, and then give them a quote. So it gives you that opportunity that even if they don't go for it that time, they will know that you are still the go-to source that can edit just about anything. So this has become very popular with a lot of my clients. They kid around with me sometimes and say, well, we know Nathan can edit anything out. So they'll just like, whatever, we'll just have Nathan take care of it later. So once you get used to this AI-powered editing and get used to using those tools and you see how fast they are, then you've got an upsell opportunity, and you've got then a lower time on site and lower time in editing. And this leads up to the next trend, which, as we're going to see more of in 2025, is going to be Adobe bashing. And what happened, as you might know by now, is that Adobe raised some of their rates for their photography plan going into 2025. Well, since that happened, everybody went up in arms, and back in 2024, when there were some terms and conditions that Adobe came out with that later they clarified, then everybody's like, well, I'm dropping Adobe, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna start using something else. Well, let's take this into consideration first before we do any more Adobe bashing. Back in the olden golden days of Photoshop, back in 1990 version 1, it cost $895 on the dollars in 1990, which would be a couple $1,000s today, and that was just to have Photoshop, which didn't have near the amount of tools that we have now. A few years later, it started getting more stuff, and when you eventually came out with CS3 back in about 2006, it was still $650. But then there was a big drop in price around 2013 when Adobe came up with the Creative Cloud, and they started selling the photography plan with Lightroom and Photoshop, which eventually came in to be Lightroom Classic. So we can see that in 2025, even if you were to take that whole price increase into effect that they're going to have in January 15th, 2025, and by the way, if you're not familiar with that, I'll leave a link to that video down in the description of this video, it's still minuscule in comparison. So even if you didn't have the photography plan locked in at $10 a month by paying by the year, even if you had to pay that $20 per month, when you're taking a look at this as a business investment, You can look at an Affinity photo, you can take a look at Luminar Neo, but they'll never come up to speed where Adobe is, because Adobe's photography plan includes Lightroom Classic and Photoshop, which can give you a very rapid workflow. So for $20 a month, with the number of tools that they have and free updates and constantly also improving things for AI and things to make your job and life a lot easier, $20 a month is a very small investment to have. It's probably even cheaper than some of your other management software that you have to use for taxes, CRM, or anything else. So, as the trend continues in 2025 to have Adobe bashing, well, don't necessarily listen to it. Don't think you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater and drop Adobe altogether. You can look at alternatives, and as you do, and you get their free trials, you can be the judge for yourself of whether it's going to be cost-effective for you. My recommendation is still to have the Adobe photography plan if you're going to be doing professional real estate photography. Next, let's talk about gear trends going into 2025. We saw some changes in 2024, but really not a lot happened. In fact, there really hasn't been any changes to professional cameras that you would use for real estate photography for quite a while. It's something that F-stoppers pointed out, and that we've kind of hit our peak of what we really can expect out of the cameras. Let's take, for instance, video. So video was originally many years ago just 1080p. Wow, wasn't that something? Have HD. 4K came out, and yes, I do recommend 4K for doing video and for reasons I talk about in my course on videography for real estate. Got a link to that too, by the way, down in the description of this video. But when they came out with 6K, well, nobody's doing 6K. If they are, they're probably wasting a lot of space because nobody's really watching anything even above 4K, and most people, when they're watching real estate videos, are at 1080. So it's really not an advancement for real estate photography to have some of this technology. The other thing is when we just talk about the photos themselves. When we talk about megapixels, I've got a video on that, link to that also in the description of this video, of how many megapixels do you really need? Well, doing real estate photography, 24 megapixels is probably max. These high megapixel cameras, for one, are going to just have smaller photo sites, which means you can have then higher noise and other issues. But the thing is, the size of it, you don't need anything over 24 megapixels for real estate photography, and especially doing full frame, then you're talking about large enough photo sites to have really good quality color and really good quality signal to noise ratio. And as far as the brand goes, it doesn't matter. Those things are all on a level playing field nowadays. There really isn't anything that's really advantageous. In fact, here's a real shocker for you, is that according to ShotKit, in 2024, the most popular camera brand with photographers was Nikon. So if you've really followed social media a lot, you'll hear a lot of people bashing on Nikon. But pros like myself have used Nikons for decades, and they're still really good cameras. In fact, one of the cameras that I recommend when doing real estate photography is the Nikon Z5. It's only $1,000 for a body, and it does an amazing job. And if you think it doesn't, I'd invite you to go over to my website and take a look at my portfolio. Every single one of those photos in my portfolio was taken with either a Nikon Z5 or it was taken off of an older DSLR, which was only the D610. But one thing we'll probably see coming out with new cameras as we go into 2025, not that it would be beneficial yet because we want the prices to go down, maybe in 2026, would be in-camera AI to do some enlargement. So it's something that Canon already started working on, where right now they're just generating JPEGs out of it, but they can do, and they're going to be implementing it, I'm sure, into more cameras and then also their software to just do automatic upscaling inside the camera. So even with upscale software now that's doing a lot of AI work, and there's some of that also just in Lightroom Classic, you've got the ability to take a 24 megapixel image and turn it into something very, very large. So to waste your money on a 50 megapixel camera, wait forever for TIFF files to go back and forth between Lightroom Classic and Photoshop and just have a lot more storage that you have to archive, it probably isn't worth it. So as we talk about gear going into 2025, the trend may be that we see, of course, camera manufacturers touting their latest and greatest flagship camera. But the trend, in my opinion, should be to at least stay the course. If you've got something that's working well for you now, stay with it. The next trends to look for are when we talk about add-ons. And a lot of this has shifted a little bit. We can see that taking the survey that I do every year in 2024, drones tended to dominate. But once again, this is something that is tied into videos. So even though video as an add-on was less popular, have to remember that a lot of the drone work that's being done is, one, it is for video and photos, and also two, the drone is really limited a lot of times to luxury real estate. So drone is a must-have, but it doesn't mean you need to have a drone. In fact, I don't own a drone, but I offer drone photography and videography, and I do a lot of that because, as you may know, I have another person that does my drone flying for me. One, I don't have the time to fit in doing drone work. I do a lot of work as it is, and I also don't want that personal hassle of getting my FAA 107, having special insurance for it, and then having neighbors come out and complain and call the police on me. So, which is something that happens on a lot of our shoots, and I let my drone pilot take care of all that noise. So it's something that you can do, but you do need to consider offering that. The next thing that was most popular with add-ons in 2024 and will be in 2025 has a caveat, and that is when we talk about 2D floor plans. Now, very popular to use Cubicasa for your 2D floor plans, just using a phone app, and yes, I highly recommend it if you're going to be doing just a 2D floor plan, but the problem is that Cubicasa has been promoting their services directly to multiple listing services and to real estate agents, cutting out the middleman, which is us, the photographer. Now, does that bother me? Well, no, because doing a 2D floor plan is not really something I care to do. I can do it, and I can charge $100 for it if it's just a simple house, and it's easy enough to do, but I'd rather spend my time doing what I do best, and that's photography. Well, I would hope so anyways. But anyways, the 2D floor plan, even though it's real popular and you can see that, doesn't mean that that's something that you're going to be able to really put a lot of effort in. So even though it's popular, yes, you can get a Cubicasa account, you can do all that, but I really wouldn't put that as a higher priority because that can easily be done by your clients. Now, along with that are things when it comes to virtual tours, when we talk about iGuide, Matterport, and I'll get to that in just a second. But the next one we have to consider is video. And video is starting to outpace virtual tours. Now, the reason for this is that, as I've talked about before, is that we've got this Instagram effect. So we go back to the story-driven content where if you're going to be posting on social media, yes, you can do it with photos, and the biggest one though, well, those are Reels. Now, it doesn't mean that everything you would do for a video in 2025 is going to be an Instagram Reel. A lot of it is still property walkthrough videos because a lot of clients do want to see some type of layout of this house. Now, that's where the 2D floor plans come in, but when you can actually see a video that is especially timed to music, that's very popular with a lot of clients. It's also easy enough to do, and once again, I have that course on doing videography for real estate, and in there, I show how you can easily make reels with using a cell phone and a cell phone gimbal, but you can also then use some of the newer gimbals to turn your phone so that you can have something vertical. Something I show in, like it was the Cinepeer Weebill 3E. I've got a link to that review video down in the description, as well as the Crane 4 if you want to see my review on that gimbal and how you can also use it for social media. But this is something that it will continue to kind of outpace these virtual tours because virtual tours don't have any more two things. One, they don't have the familiar metaphor. So people are used to seeing like a photo or scrolling, whatever they do on Instagram, they're used to it, and also seeing that little triangle play button for a video, they know how to do that. But when they get in front of a virtual tour, well, what is it that you're supposed to do with it? The other thing is that these virtual tours don't share anything. So you can put them on the multiple listing service, and yeah, they'll show up maybe on Zillow if you're lucky, because I'll get to a couple things on that here in just a second. But when it comes to Instagram, forget about it. You're really not going to be able to share a virtual tour, but you can share a video, and that's what's making video king. So when you talk to your clients about if they're talking about a virtual tour that they like, Also consider offering to them, well, would you like to have a video tour also, or maybe instead of? Because with my video tour that I can provide you not just a walkthrough video, but also an Instagram reel so that you can promote this much better and into a wider audience. Now, when we talk about virtual tours themselves, yes, there are trends that are going on with virtual tours because Matterport was recently acquired by the CoStar Group, and also iGuide, the other popular one. They've also made some deals with FBS, so they were able to get into Flex MLS to offer some of their services. So one of the reasons why both of these companies have been doing this, I believe it's pretty obvious, is that they haven't been gaining this popularity that they thought they would as time went forward. So it used to be, especially during the pandemic, that these virtual tours were king. Well, nowadays, for instance, my drone pilot who also does Matterport, that thing's just collecting dust. Out here in our area, Ventura County in Los Angeles, California, we're just not getting a lot of virtual tours. Now, I know that a lot of people are still doing them, and I understand that people are still producing them, for instance, with Zillow and 3D Home, but those things are constantly changing. And the reason being is that because they're just not quite as popular as they used to be. And once again, when we talk about video, well, you just can't share a 3D virtual tour on Instagram. So immediately it loses some of its impact. But the other trend to look for is what's going to happen between the difference between Matterport and iGuide. Those are the two major ones when it comes to doing your virtual tours. And Matterport, being acquired by the CoStar Group, that's the company that owns Homes.com and Apartments.com, and that could start causing a conflict. So as other listing sites like Realtor.com and Zillow, well, if they don't want to be in bed with someone who's promoting their other sites and possibly favoring their other sites like Homes.com and Apartments.com, then they might not be so friendly toward Matterport any longer. In fact, that's kind of a marriage that has divorced itself a long time ago here in the last few years. So something to keep an eye on would probably be iGuide as we move forward into 2025. But overall, when it comes to virtual tours, that trend still remains low. And when it comes to a low on the popularity list, we're looking at twilight photography. And yes, it is still important, and I still do it for luxury homes. But I gotta be honest, out of a few hundred homes that I might photograph during the year, I might be lucky to do 5 twilight shoots even for luxury properties. Because the marketing material that was once very popular for twilight photography is almost a thing of the past. And that used to be flyers. So they used to do these mass mailings through the postal service, and people would receive in their mailbox a physical piece of paper or card that showed this stunning picture. Nobody does that anymore. Nobody is really looking at their mail to go, I'm looking for a house. Oh, that looks good. No, that just goes into the trash. People, though, are following more people on Instagram. That's where some of the key marketing is. And once again, this goes back full circle to that story-driven content. So twilight photography is really cool. It can produce some very impactful images, and it can also be used in story-driven content, but if it's used properly. And one of the big things with that is if you're going to be doing twilight photography is to also try to promote maybe doing some twilight video or some sunset video, something that also can give you story-driven content for your clients so that they can share a lot of this on social media. But overall, that story-driven content is going to be king when it comes through. 2025 is one of the biggest trends in real estate photography. Things are constantly evolving, but I'll keep an eye on it as things do progress. I'll keep you posted.